The research station sat on the edge of the purple jungle like a metal box dropped from space. Inside, scientists from 20 different planets worked together, studying the animals of Halcor Prime. Most of these animals could kill a person in seconds. The researchers stayed behind thick walls and used robots to do the dangerous work. Taemin was the only human at the station. He had been there for 8 months, studying how the planet's ecosystem worked. The other researchers thought humans were weak. No armor, no venom, no natural weapons. But Taemin had survived 3 equipment failures, 2 toxic plant exposures, and 1 very close encounter with a razor wing that should have killed him. He was still alive because he was careful and because he paid attention. Today, the station was buzzing with nervous energy. They had captured a Venom-Tusk Cub. Venom-Tusks were the most dangerous predators on Halcor Prime. Adults stood 3 meters tall and could punch through military armor with their crystal tusks. Those tusks dripped with poison that shut down the nervous system in seconds. Even the babies were deadly. They were born, ready to kill. The cub sat in a containment cell in the lower level. Taemin went down to look at it with the other researchers. They all stood far back from the transparent wall. The creature was small, about the size of a big dog. Its scales were dark blue, almost black. The 2 tusks jutting from its mouth were only 10 centimeters long, but venom already dripped from their tips. The cub paced back and forth, never stopping. "We have tried everything," said Vorak, the head scientist. He was a Krillian, with a hard shell covering his body and 4 arms. Automated feeders, live prey, nutrient paste. It attacks everything. It will not eat. "How long has it been?" asked Taemin. 5 days since capture. 3 days since it last ate anything. Taemin watched the cub pace. Its movements were frantic. Its eyes darted to every shadow. When a researcher moved too quickly, the cub threw itself against the wall, shrieking and spraying venom. "It will die soon," Vorak said flatly. "A pity. We wanted to study its growth patterns." The other researchers nodded and began to leave. They had other work to do. A dying specimen was just bad luck, but Taemin stayed. He watched the cub for a long time. Something about its behavior bothered him. The constant movement, the way it pressed itself into the darkest corner, the panic in its eyes. "You're not mean," Taemin said quietly to the glass. "You're scared." That night, after the station's lights dimmed for sleep cycle, Taemin went back down to the containment level. He carried a container of fresh meat from the station's food stores. The cub's head snapped toward him the moment he entered the room. Taemin moved slowly. He kept his movements smooth and predictable. He had worked with frightened animals back on Earth, rescuing dogs and cats that had been hurt or abandoned. He knew that scared animals needed space and patience, not force. He sat down on the floor about 3 meters from the transparent wall. The cub watched him with huge eyes. Its pupils were thin vertical slits. A low growl rumbled in its chest. Taemin didn't look directly at the creature. Direct eye contact meant challenge, meant threat. Instead, he looked at the floor and placed the container of meat beside him. Then he just sat there. The cub growled louder. It showed all its teeth. Venom dripped faster from its tusks, pooling on the floor. Taemin didn't move. He breathed slowly and evenly. He made himself as small and non-threatening as possible. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2 hours. Slowly, so slowly. The cub's growl faded. Its scales, which had been standing up like angry needles, began to flatten. It stopped pacing and sat down, still watching Taemin but no longer ready to attack. Taemin waited. Another hour passed. The cub's head drooped. It was exhausted, starving, terrified. But something in Taemin's stillness, his patience, was getting through. Finally, moving like a shadow, the cub crept forward. It stayed low to the ground, ready to bolt at any second. Its eyes never left Taemin. The transparent wall separated them, but there was a small feeding slot at the bottom, designed for robots to push food through. Tae-min had left the inner door open. The cub's nose appeared in the slot, sniffing. Then its head pushed through. It could smell the meat. Tae-min slowly, carefully, moved one piece of meat closer to the slot. The cub stared at him. Its whole body trembled. Then it lunged forward, snatched the meat, and scrambled back into the cell. It ate the meat so fast it almost choked. Then it crept forward again, looking at Tae-min with those huge eyes. Tae-min pushed another piece of meat closer. The cub took it. This time, it didn't run away. It ate right there in the slot opening, watching Tae-min the whole time. They continued like this until the container was empty. The cub ate every piece. Its belly was round and full for the first time in days. Then Tae-min did something crazy. He extended his hand, palm down, toward the slot. Every researcher would have said he was insane. Venom-Tusks didn't bond. They didn't trust. They killed anything that came close. But the cub looked at his hand. It tilted its head, confused. Then, moving carefully, it pressed its nose against Tae-min's fingers. The scales were smooth and warm. The cub made a sound, soft and questioning, like a purr mixed with a chirp. Tae-min smiled. "There you go," he said quietly. "Not so scary now, are we?" He sat with the cub until the station's morning lights began to brighten. By then, the creature had squeezed most of its body through the feeding slot and was lying with its head on Tae-min's leg. When the other researchers arrived for morning shift, they found Tae-min asleep on the floor with a Venom-Tusk Cub curled against him like a pet cat. Vorak stood frozen in the doorway, his forearms hanging limp in shock. "Impossible," he whispered. But it wasn't impossible. It was just something no one had thought to try before. The cub raised its head and looked at the gathered researchers. Its scales immediately bristled. It moved in front of Tae-min, placing itself between the human and the strangers. A warning hiss escaped its mouth. Tae-min woke up, groggy and confused. It took him a moment to remember where he was. Then, he felt the warm weight of the cub against his legs and saw the crowd of shocked faces staring at him. "Oh," he said, "good morning." "How?" Vorak demanded. "How did you do this?" Tae-min looked down at the cub, who was still watching the other researchers with suspicion. He scratched behind the ridge of the creature's head, where the scales were softer. The cub's hiss faded into that strange, purring chirp. "I just fed it," Tae-min said. "And I didn't try to force anything. I let it choose." The cub looked up at Tae-min, and something in its alien eyes looked almost like trust, like gratitude. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for Tae-min and the cub, but for everyone's understanding of what Venom-Tusks really were, because the cub had chosen Tae-min, and it would never let anyone else get close again. News traveled fast through the research station. By midday, everyone knew about the human and the Venom-Tusk Cub. Scientists from every department found excuses to walk past the containment level. They wanted to see it with their own eyes. The station director arrived before lunch. Her name was Korvax, and she was a Graxian. She stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and tentacles that moved constantly, showing her emotions. Right now, those tentacles were coiled tight with skepticism. "Show me," she said to Tae-min. Tae-min was still in the containment room. He had only left once, briefly, to use the bathroom and grab some food. The cub had screamed the entire time he was gone. When he came back, it had pressed itself against the door, making distressed sounds he had never heard any animal make before. Now the cub was curled up next to him, dozing. Tae-min sat on the floor with his back against the wall, reading reports on his tablet. Every few minutes, the cub would lift its head to make sure he was still there, then settle back down. "There's nothing to show," Tae-min said. "We're just existing together. We're just existing together." Korvax's tentacles loosened slightly. "The behavioral data is extraordinary. Venom-tusks are solitary hunters. They don't bond. They don't form attachments. This contradicts 50 years of research. Maybe the research was wrong. The director's large eyes blinked slowly. Or maybe you possess some unknown ability. Pheromones, perhaps. Or latent psionic talent. We need to run tests. Or maybe, Taman said, keeping his voice level. The cub was scared and alone. And I was the first person to treat it with kindness instead of force. Korvax made a rumbling sound that might have been disagreement. We will test this. Other researchers will attempt to interact with the specimen. We must determine if this is something unique to you or if it can be replicated. Taman wanted to argue, but he was too tired. He had barely slept. His back ached from sitting on the hard floor. But when he looked down at the cub, peacefully sleeping against his leg, he knew he couldn't leave it alone. Fine, he said, but do it carefully. Don't traumatize the poor thing more than it already has been. The tests began that afternoon. First, they sent in Vorak, the head scientist. He entered the containment room slowly, holding a container of meat. The cub's eyes snapped open the instant the door slid shut behind him. The change was immediate. The cub went from relaxed to battle-ready in half a second. Its scales stood up like armor. Its tusks extended, venom already flowing. A sound came from its throat that made even Tamin's skin crawl, a deep, threatening growl that promised violence. It's okay, Tamin said quickly. He's just bringing food. But the cub didn't care. When Vorak took another step forward, the cub launched itself at him like a missile. Vorak barely got his armored arms up in time. The cub's tusks scraped against his shell, leaving gouges in the supposedly impenetrable surface. Venom sprayed across Vorak's chest plate, hissing and smoking. Out! Taman shouted. Get out now! Vorak scrambled backward through the door. The moment it closed, the cub stopped attacking. It returned to Taman immediately, pressing against him, scales still raised, breathing hard. Taman wrapped his arms around the creature, feeling it tremble. It's okay, he murmured. You're safe. I won't let them hurt you. The cub made a small, distressed sound and pushed its head under Taman's arm. They tried 5 more times that day with different researchers. A Velmorian medic who specialized in dangerous species. A Krillian who had handled predators for 30 years. Even Hyun Woo, another human who worked in the engineering department and who Taemin had shared meals with dozens of times. The result was always the same. The cub allowed no one else close. With Hyun Woo, it didn't attack immediately, but it positioned itself between him and Taemin. Scales bristled, making it clear that the other human was not welcome. It's guarding you, Hyun Woo observed from outside the containment room. He had wisely retreated when the cub's warning hiss grew louder. Like you're its territory. Or its parent. Taemin scratched the cub's head. The creature's scales had finally smoothed down, now that they were alone again. I think it just trusts me. And it doesn't trust anyone else. That's one hell of a trust issue. Can you blame it? It was ripped away from everything it knew, thrown in a cage, poked and prodded by strangers. I'm the only one who sat with it, instead of treating it like a dangerous object. Hyun Woo nodded slowly. The director isn't going to like this. They wanted to study the bonding behavior, but if you're the only one who can interact with it, that limits the research significantly. Good, Taemin said flatly. That night, Korvax called a meeting. Taemin attended via hologram, refusing to leave the cub. The creature was growing noticeably larger, already 10 centimeters taller than when it had arrived. A proper diet was doing wonders for its health. The Coalition Council has been informed of your success, Korvax said. They are extremely interested. They want the specimen transferred to Praxis Station for comprehensive study. Taemin's stomach dropped. What? No. You can't transfer it. It barely tolerates this environment. A transport ship would traumatize it. The decision has been made. Praxis Station has far better facilities for this kind of research. The specimen will be properly cared for. The specimen has a name. Taemin snapped. I call it Ash. And Ash isn't going anywhere without me. Korvax's tentacles coiled. You cannot dictate terms to the Coalition Council. Watch me. Taemin ended the call. Hyun-woo came to the containment room an hour later with food and coffee. He sat outside the transparent wall, while Taemin ate. You're making enemies, Hyun-woo said quietly. I don't care. I'm not letting them treat Ash like a thing. They're sending a transport ship in 4 days. High-security vessel designed for dangerous cargo. If you don't cooperate, they'll sedate the cub and take it anyway. Taemin looked at Ash, who was gnawing contentedly on a large bone. The cub had started playing, a sign of how much healthier it was becoming. It would toss the bone in the air and pounce on it, making little growling sounds that were almost playful. Then, I guess I need to make sure I'm on that ship, Taemin said. Hyun-woo pulled up a regulation document on his tablet. I've been reading Coalition transport protocols. There's a clause about handlers accompanying bonded specimens. It's meant for working animals, like security beasts or medical assistance creatures. But the language is broad. If we can argue that separating you from Ash poses a danger to either the specimen or the transport crew, they have to let you go. Will they buy that argument? After today's demonstration, when a veteran xenobiologist with military-grade armor barely escaped with minor injuries? Yeah, I think they'll buy it. Taemin smiled for the first time all day. You're a good friend, Hyun-woo. I'm a guy who likes his research. And this is the most interesting research I've ever seen. He paused. Also, you're right. They shouldn't treat Ash like an object. The cub deserves better. Over the next 4 days, Taemin prepared. He gathered supplies, read everything he could about Praxis Station, and spent every moment with Ash. The cub was growing so fast that Taemin could see the difference each morning. Its scales were brightening to a beautiful deep blue with hints of purple. Its tusks were longer, sharper, but its bond with Taemin only grew stronger. Ash followed him everywhere within the containment room. When Taemin sat, Ash sat beside him. When he stood, Ash stood too. The creature watched him constantly, as if afraid he might disappear. I won't leave you, Taemin promised, rubbing the soft scales under Ash's chin. Wherever they take you, I'm coming too. Ash made that purring chirp sound and pressed its head against Taemin's chest. The transport ship arrived exactly on schedule, and Taemin kept his promise. The transport ship was massive and cold. Commander Velik was a Krillian military officer with zero patience and even less interest in what Taemin had to say. His shell was decorated with medals and battle scars. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he checked equipment. The creature will be sedated and placed in the cargo hold, Velik announced. We depart in 1 hour. No sedation, Taemin said firmly. Velik's mandibles clicked in annoyance. This is not a negotiation. Human, that creature is dangerous. We have protocols. Your protocols will get someone killed, or get Ash killed. Let me show you. Taemin had spent the morning working with Ash, preparing the cub for this moment. They had practiced walking together, staying calm even when the environment changed. Ash trusted him completely now. Velik gestured impatiently. Fine, proceed. But when this fails, we do things my way. They brought the transport crate to the containment room. It was large, reinforced, designed to hold creatures twice Ash's current size. Multiple security officers surrounded it, weapons ready. The moment the crate came into view, Ash's scales bristled. The cub moved in front of Taemin, defensive and afraid. Easy, Taemin said softly. He placed his hand on Ash's head. It's just a box. Nothing to be scared of. But Ash knew something was wrong. The cub could sense the tension in the room, could smell the fear from the security officers. A low growl started in its chest. Taemin sat down on the floor, cross-legged. Come here, he said gently. Ash looked at him, then at the crate, then back at him. Slowly, the cub sat down beside Taemin, leaning against him. We're going on a trip, Taemin explained, as if the cub could understand every word. Maybe it could. I need you to be brave. Can you do that for me? Ash's scales slowly flattened. The growl faded. The cub pressed its nose against Taemin's cheek, making a questioning sound. I'll be with you the whole time, Taemin promised. Right beside you. Always. He stood up and walked toward the crate. Behind him, every security officer tensed. Ash followed Taemin. The cub stayed so close that it bumped against his legs with every step. When they reached the crate, Taemin climbed inside and sat down. Ash didn't hesitate. The cub jumped in after him, curled up with its head on Taemin's lap, and closed its eyes. The room was completely silent. Nobody could believe what they had just seen. Seal it, Velik finally said, his voice strangely quiet. Wait, Taemin called out. I'm coming too. Absolutely not. Passengers travel in the crew quarters, and Ash travels in cargo? Alone? And terrified? No. I stay with Ash, or you'll have a panicked apex predator tearing through your ship's hull. Your choice. Velik's mandibles ground together. Taemin could see him calculating risks. Finally, the commander nodded sharply. Fine. But if anything goes wrong, you are responsible. Understood. They sealed the crate but left the interior lights on. Taemin had a small pack with food, water, a blanket, and a tablet loaded with books. It would be a 3-day journey to Praxis Station. He had survived worse conditions. The first day was hard. The ship's engines created constant noise and vibration. Ash hated it. The cub paced within the limited space of the crate, agitated and stressed. Several times, Taemin had to wrap his arms around the creature just to keep it from hurting itself. I know, he murmured over and over. I know it's scary, but we're okay. We're together. By the second day, Ash had accepted the situation. The cub stopped fighting and instead stayed pressed against Taemin's side, drawing comfort from his presence. Taemin read books aloud, partly for himself and partly because the sound of his voice seemed to calm Ash down. Once, a crew member approached the crate to check on them. Ash's reaction was immediate and violent. The cub threw itself at the transparent wall, shrieking and spraying venom. The crew member ran. After that, everyone gave the crate a very wide berth. You really need to work on your people skills, Taemin told Ash, scratching behind the cub's ear ridges. Ash just made that purring chirp and settled back down. On the third day, they arrived at Praxis Station. Taemin was exhausted, hungry, and covered in scratches from Ash's enthusiastic playing. But the cub was healthy and calm, which was more than could be said for what would have happened with sedation and forced transport. The docking bay was huge, easily 10 times the size of the Halcor Prime station. Security personnel lined the walls. Apparently, word of the dangerous cargo had spread. A woman approached the crate as it was being unloaded. She was human, older than Taemin, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp and calculating. I'm Da-un, she said. Chief xenobiologist here at Praxis Station. I've read all the reports about you and your remarkable friend. His name is Ash, Taemin said. Ash, Da-un repeated, looking at the cub with obvious fascination. You look terrible. By the way, 3 days in a shipping crate will do that. Come on. Let's get you both settled. We've prepared a habitat that should be more comfortable than that box. The habitat was impressive. It was a large, enclosed space with multiple levels, climate control, and enrichment features like climbing structures and water features. Ash took one look at it and hated it immediately. The cub refused to explore. Instead, it stayed right next to whichever wall was closest to Taemin. When Taemin tried to leave to get cleaned up and eat real food, Ash began to panic. The cub's distress calls echoed through the entire facility. "Well," Daun said, watching through the observation window. "That's problematic." Daun, "It just needs time to adjust," Taemin said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. But Ash didn't adjust. Over the next week, the situation only got worse. The cub barely ate. It stopped playing. All the healthy behaviors it had developed at Halcor Prime disappeared. Ash just sat by the wall, staring at wherever Taemin was visible, making sad sounds that broke Taemin's heart. The research team was frustrated. How could they study natural Venom-Tusk behavior when the creature refused to act naturally? "Maybe this is natural," Taemin argued during a team meeting. "Maybe Venom-Tusks are supposed to bond with others. Maybe being alone is what's unnatural for them. That goes against everything we know about the species," said a Velmorian researcher. "Then maybe everything we know is wrong." Daun leaned forward. "You're suggesting that Venom-Tusks are social creatures? That they form attachments and bonds? I'm saying that Ash is miserable alone, even in this amazing habitat. The only time the cub seems happy is when I'm in there, which prevents us from studying its natural behaviors." "Maybe its natural behavior includes having bonds with others," Taemin insisted. The room fell into thoughtful silence. Finally, Daun spoke. "We have 2 other juvenile Venom-Tusks in quarantine. Orphans. They're refusing all food and contact, same as Ash did initially. If your theory is correct, if these creatures need social bonds, then perhaps you want to introduce them to Ash?" Taemin said. "It could be a disaster, 3 stressed predators in close proximity. But it could also prove your theory." 3. Taemin thought about Ash, sitting alone and sad. "Let's try it." They started slowly. The new cubs were placed in a habitat next to Ash's, with an opaque wall between them. For the first day, they could only smell and hear each other. Ash's reaction was immediate and surprising. The cub's scales brightened. It started making sounds Taemin had never heard before. Soft, chirping calls that seemed almost like questions. "That's a contact call," Daun said, her voice tight with excitement. "We've only recorded it once in the wild. We had no idea what it meant." On the second day, they made the wall transparent. The 3 cubs pressed against the barrier from both sides. No aggression, no fighting, just interest, curiosity, almost like they were happy to see each other. They moved slowly, synchronized. Their scales flickered in patterns. Their tails swayed in rhythm. "They're communicating," Hyunwoo breathed. He had transferred to Praxis Station to continue working on the project. "Look at those scale patterns. That's deliberate." On the 3rd day, with every safety measure in place, they opened the barrier. The 3 cubs touched noses. They circled each other, scales smooth, making soft sounds. Then, they started to play, chasing and tumbling in ways that looked like pure joy. Taemin watched with tears in his eyes. Ash was happy. Finally, truly happy. But when one of the other cubs got too close to Taemin, Ash immediately moved between them. Scales raised in warning. The cub was protecting him, claiming him as part of its group. "You're not just bonded to Ash," Daun said quietly. "You're family." 3 months had passed since the cubs met. The change in all 3 creatures was remarkable. They were healthy, active, and clearly happy. They played together, hunted together in simulation exercises, and slept in a pile like a litter of puppies. It was behavior no one had ever seen in Venom-Tusks before. The research station buzzed with activity. Scientists from across the coalition were requesting time to observe the cubs. Papers were being written. Theories were being overturned. Everything they thought they knew about Venom-Tusks was being rewritten. But Ash still wouldn't let anyone, except Taemin, get close. The other 2 cubs, named Storm and River by the research team, were only slightly more tolerant. They would accept food from handlers using long poles, but physical contact was absolutely forbidden. If anyone tried, all three cubs would react defensively. Tae-min had become an unofficial member of the research team. He spent his days in the habitat, observing and recording behaviors. At night, he wrote reports that Da-un devoured eagerly. His insights were proving invaluable. "You have a natural talent for this," Da-un told him one evening. They sat in her office, reviewing footage of the cubs' latest play session. "Formal training in xenobiology would make you exceptional." Tae-min smiled tiredly. "I didn't go to fancy schools. I just pay attention to what animals are telling me. That's more valuable than any degree." She pulled up a new document on her screen. "I want to show you something. The Coalition Council is proposing a new initiative. Number. The document detailed a long-term field study of venom-tusks in their natural habitat on Halcor Prime. The goal was to observe wild populations, understand their social structures, and determine if the bonding behavior was natural or unique to captive specimens. "This is ambitious," Tae-min said, "and incredibly dangerous. It would require someone the venom-tusks might accept. Someone who's already proven they can earn this species' trust." Da-un looked at him meaningfully. "They want you to lead the field team." Tae-min's heart skipped. "Me? Lead a research expedition? You're the only human who's successfully bonded with a venom-tusk. If anyone can approach wild specimens safely, it's you. Possibly with Ash's help." The idea was thrilling and terrifying. Going back to Halcor Prime, tracking venom-tusks in the wild, learning their true nature. But it would mean leaving the safety of the station, living in the jungle for months, maybe years. And it would mean putting Ash in potential danger. "I need to think about it," Tae-min said. That night, he sat in the habitat with the three cubs. They had grown so much. Ash was now nearly 2 meters tall, a magnificent creature with midnight blue scales that shimmered purple in certain lights. Storm and River were slightly smaller, their scales lighter shades of blue and green. Ash lay with its head in Tae-min's lap, dozing. The other two cubs were curled together nearby, also sleeping. It was a peaceful scene that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. "What do you think?" Tae-min asked Ash quietly. "Should we go back to your homeworld? Try to find your family?" Ash's eyes opened. The cub lifted its head and looked at Tae-min with those intelligent, alien eyes. Then, it pressed its nose against Tae-min's face and made a soft, chirping sound. "Yeah," Tae-min said, scratching behind Ash's ear ridges. "We're a team. Whatever we do together." The next morning, Tae-min told Da-un he would lead the expedition. The preparations began immediately. Hyun-woo would be part of the team, handling technical equipment and data analysis. A Velmorian named Korva would serve as medic and xenobiology specialist. They would have 2 armed guards, both experienced in jungle survival, and of course, Ash would come along. Storm and River would stay at Praxis Station. They were doing well in the research habitat, and moving them would be unnecessarily risky. Ash wasn't happy about leaving them, but when the time came to board the transport ship back to Halcor Prime, the cub followed Tae-min without hesitation. The journey took 5 days. Ash handled it much better this time, having learned that transport ships were temporary discomfort, not permanent imprisonment. Tae-min spent the time reading everything he could about venom-tusk territories and behavior patterns. When they landed on Halcor Prime, the purple jungle looked both familiar and alien. Tae-min had spent months here before, but he had always been inside the research station or inside protective vehicles. Now he would be walking through the jungle, exposed and vulnerable. "Stay close," he told Ash. The cub's scales rippled in a pattern Tae-min had learned meant acknowledgement. Ash understood. They set up base camp 5 kilometers from the research station, in a region where venom-tusk tracks had been spotted frequently. The camp was simple. Durable tents, sensor equipment, weapons for emergencies, and enough supplies for 3 months. For the first week, they saw nothing. The jungle was alive with sounds and movements, but no venom-tusks appeared. Tae-min began to wonder if wild specimens would avoid them, sensing Ash as an intruder. Then, On the 8th day, Ash suddenly went rigid. The cub's scales stood up, not in aggression, but in alertness. It stared into the jungle, nostrils flaring. "What is it?" Taemin whispered. A deep, rumbling call echoed through the trees. It was similar to Ash's contact chirps but deeper, more resonant. An adult Venom-Tusk. Ash responded immediately, calling back. The sound was plaintive, almost like a child calling for a parent. The jungle fell silent. Then, slowly, a massive shape emerged from the shadows. The adult Venom-Tusk was enormous, easily 4 meters tall. Its scales were deep indigo, almost black, with scars crossing its hide. The crystal tusks were as long as Taemin's arm, gleaming with venom. This was an apex predator in its prime, a creature that could kill him in an instant. Taemin's instinct was to run, but he forced himself to stay still. Ash stood between him and the adult, scales smooth, making soft sounds. The adult approached slowly, its eyes fixed on Ash, then moved to Taemin. It tilted its massive head, studying this strange small creature that stood with its cub. Taemin didn't move. He barely breathed. Everything depended on this moment. The adult lowered its head and touched its nose to Ash's. Ash chirped happily, pressing against the larger creature. Then Ash turned and gently pushed Taemin forward, as if introducing him. The adult's enormous eyes fixed on Taemin. One step forward, and those tusks could end his life. But Taemin had learned to trust Ash's judgment. Slowly, carefully, he extended his hand. The adult Venom-Tusk sniffed his hand. Its breath was hot and smelled of meat. Time seemed to stop. Then, incredibly, the adult made a soft sound and allowed Taemin to touch its snout. From the camp, Hyunwoo was recording everything, his hands shaking with excitement. "This is impossible," he whispered into his recorder. "An adult wild Venom-Tusk is accepting human contact. This changes everything." Over the next weeks, more Venom-Tusks appeared. And because Ash trusted Taemin, the family slowly began to trust him too. Taemin learned more about Venom-Tusks in those weeks than humanity had learned in 50 years. They were deeply social creatures that formed strong family bonds. They communicated through complex scale patterns and vocalizations. They played. They grieved. They cared for their young with tenderness that contradicted everything people believed about them. And they accepted Taemin as part of Ash's pack. An honorary member, strange and small and scaleless, but family nonetheless. One evening, Taemin sat by the fire with Ash curled beside him and the adult Venom-Tusks resting nearby. The jungle sang with night sounds. Stars shone through breaks in the canopy. "We did it," Hyunwoo said quietly, sitting across from Taemin. "We proved they're not monsters. We changed how an entire species will be treated." Taemin looked at Ash, at the family sleeping peacefully around them. "I just fed a scared cub once. That's all. That's everything," Hyunwoo replied. 6 months in the jungle changed everything. The research data was extraordinary. Video recordings showed Venom-Tusks teaching their young to hunt cooperatively. Audio files captured complex conversations between family members. Behavioral observations proved that Venom-Tusks grieved their dead, celebrated successful hunts, and formed bonds that lasted lifetimes. The Coalition Council reviewed the data and made a historic decision. Venom-Tusks were removed from the dangerous predator list. Hunting them became illegal. Conservation programs were established. An entire species' fate changed because one human had shown kindness to one scared cub. But for Taemin, none of the fame or recognition mattered as much as the quiet moments. Like now, sitting by the river with Ash, watching the purple sunset paint the sky in shades of violet and gold. Ash had grown into a magnificent adult. The cub was gone, replaced by a powerful creature with gleaming scales and deadly tusks. But when those tusks nuzzled gently against Taemin's shoulder, they were as harmless as a pet's affection. You've gotten big, Taemin said, scratching the soft scales under Ash's jaw. Pretty soon you won't fit in my lap anymore. Ash made a sound that almost seemed like laughter, and deliberately draped its massive head across Taemin's legs, nearly crushing him. The message was clear. Lap-sitting was not negotiable. Regardless of size, Hyun-woo approached, tablet in hand. The Coalition is requesting your presence at Praxis Station. They want you to present the findings to the full council. And there's something else. He paused. They're offering you a position as Director of Venom-Tusk Research. Full funding. Your own team. Authority to set conservation policies. Taemin stared at him. Me? Director? I don't even have a degree. You have 6 months of field experience that no one else can replicate. You've lived with wild venom tusks. You understand them better than anyone in the galaxy. Hyun-woo smiled. Also, you're the only person alive that Ash will listen to, and Ash is the key to all future research. As if on cue, Ash lifted its head and looked at Taemin with those intelligent eyes. The bond between them had only grown stronger. Sometimes, Taemin swore the creature could read his thoughts. Maybe it could. They had learned each other's languages, spoken and unspoken. What do you think? Taemin asked Ash. Want to be a research assistant? Ash chirped and licked Taemin's face with a tongue that was rough and warm and slightly disgusting. Taemin laughed, pushing the massive head away. I'll take that as a yes. The journey back to Praxis Station was bittersweet. Taemin had grown to love the jungle, the freedom of living among the venom tusks in their natural environment. But he also understood the importance of what they had discovered. The knowledge needed to be shared, protected, used to help the species survive. At Praxis Station, Storm and River greeted Ash with obvious joy. The 3 cubs, now 3 young adults, touched noses and made happy sounds. They played together like no time had passed, tumbling and chasing through the enlarged habitat that had been built during Ash's absence. Da-eun met Taemin in the observation deck. She looked older, more tired, but her eyes sparkled with excitement. You did it. You actually did it. An entire species saved because you were kind to one frightened cub. I didn't save them alone. Your research, Hyun-woo's data analysis, the whole team's work. Don't be modest. We both know this started with you sitting on a floor all night, waiting for a scared animal to trust you. She pulled up a holographic display. Look at this. Conservation zones established across 3 continents on Halcor Prime. Breeding programs to help strengthen wild populations. Education initiatives to teach other species about venom-tusk intelligence and social needs. All because you proved they weren't mindless killers. The hologram showed venom-tusk families roaming freely across protected lands. Cubs playing in the purple jungle. Adults hunting cooperatively. Living as they were meant to live. There's more, Da-eun continued. Other research teams are applying your approach to different species. The patient observation, the trust building, the assumption of intelligence and emotional depth. You've changed how we do xenobiology. Taemin felt overwhelmed. He had just wanted to help one scared cub. He never imagined it would lead to this. The council presentation was intimidating. Representatives from dozens of species filled the grand chamber. Taemin, who usually wore simple field clothes, had been stuffed into formal attire that felt stiff and uncomfortable. But when he started talking about Ash, about the months in the jungle, about watching venom-tusk parents teach their young and seeing the grief in their eyes when a family member died, his discomfort faded. He showed them videos, played recordings of venom-tusk communication, explained the complex social structures that had been completely unknown before. We thought they were monsters, Taemin said, his voice carrying through the chamber. But we were wrong. They're not monsters, they're people, different from us, but with the same needs for family, for belonging, for love. We just had to be patient enough to see it. The chamber was silent when he finished. Then, Slowly, applause began. It started with the human representatives, then spread through the entire council. Even species that typically showed no emotion were making gestures of approval. Afterward, a Krillian diplomat approached. It was Velik, the commander who had transported Ash to Praxis Station. "I thought you were foolish," Velik said, his translator clicking, "risking your life for a dangerous predator. But you were wise, and I was blind. The Krillian Confederation formally apologizes for our previous policies toward Venom-Tusks. Similar apologies came from other species throughout the day. It was awkward and touching, and slightly surreal. That evening, Taemin escaped to the habitat where Ash waited. The creature sensed his exhaustion immediately, and lay down, inviting Taemin to lean against its warm bulk. The scales were smooth and comforting. The steady breathing was like a meditation. "Long day?" Hyunwoo asked, finding them there an hour later. "Very long. I don't think I'm cut out for politics. Good thing your new position is about research, not politics." Hyunwoo sat down nearby. "Have you thought about what you want to do first as director?" Taemin had thought about little else. "I want to go back to Halcor Prime. Establish a permanent research station in Venom-Tusk territory. Train a new generation of researchers who understand that observation and patience matter more than force. Document every family group we can find." He paused. "And I want to find Ash's birth family. Really find them, I mean. Maybe they're still out there. That could take years. Then, it takes years." Taemin scratched behind Ash's ear ridge, in the spot that always made the creature's scales ripple with pleasure. "We've got time." "Taemin." Ash made a contented sound, somewhere between a purr and a rumble. Storm and River joined them, curling up nearby. Three massive predators, capable of incredible violence, choosing instead to nap peacefully with their human friend. Taemin thought about that night months ago, when he had first sat with a terrified cub. He had just wanted to help. He never imagined one act of kindness could change so much. But maybe that was the point. Maybe big changes always started with small acts. One person choosing compassion over fear. One moment of connection. Across impossible differences, he had fed a Venom-Tusk Cub once. Just once. And that cub had chosen him, protected him, trusted him completely. That bond had revealed truths about an entire species, had saved them from extinction, had proven that even the most dangerous creatures could be understood if someone was brave enough to try. As Taemin drifted to sleep against Ash's warm side, surrounded by creatures the galaxy had once feared, he realized something important. He hadn't saved Ash. Ash had saved him, had given his life purpose and meaning, had taught him that intelligence and emotion existed in forms that looked nothing like human. The galaxy was vast and full of species that seemed alien and frightening. But Taemin had learned the most valuable lesson. That, underneath the scales and tusks and venom, underneath all the differences, there was always the possibility of connection, of understanding, of love. All you had to do was be patient enough to see it. And brave enough to offer kindness, even when everything told you to be afraid. Ash shifted slightly, still sleeping, and unconsciously wrapped a protective leg around Taemin. The message was clear. This human was pack, was family, was loved. And really, Taemin thought as sleep claimed him, what more could anyone ask for?